So what you see here is the bearing boards that is going to be for my new flip top workbench. And the reason I need a flip top workbench is I have a mess that is very cluttered, and this section right here is where I usually work. As you can see, that's where my sanding station is. But I currently swap out this sander and this sander, and I have a jointer now that I need to put somewhere. And you can see I've changed this out to a 4-inch port and a 4-inch port and a 4-inch port because I have my wonderful dust collector there. And so I need somewhere to put these three tools because obviously I have no floor space. The goal is to eventually put it somewhere along this wall and then have somewhere to put the stuff that's sitting on the floor, but also somewhere to put the tools so I have slightly more than a 1 foot by 2 foot or 2 foot by 2 foot workbench area, because normally this spot is filled with that sander. So what I have decided to do is I got 4 sheets of 2 foot by 4 foot 3/4 inch plywood, and I sandwiched them all together. First I screwed the outside 2 pieces together, and then there's going to be 2x4s in between on the outside edges. And then I ran, and let's see if I can do this. I ran a pipe that has a 7/8 inch outside diameter through there. And the way I did that, I got one of these round nose bits from Whiteside. It's a very awesome bit. It has a 7/16 inch radius, 7/8 inch cutting diameter, and 1/4 length. It has a 1/2 inch collet, I believe is the correct term. And so I also got my old router was only a 1/4 inch, so I went to Home Depot and got one of these rigid routers. It is awesome, and the dust collection is very nice. It is a plunge router. I think you can also do it with a fixed base, etc. But currently this, or is this a fixed base? No, this is actually the fixed base. I think so. Yeah, I think this is the fixed base. I'm sure you can probably get the other way, but in the case, I just needed it for a fixed base. It has a very nice dust collection setup. It did not make much of a mess at all. And so what I did was I took the 2 pieces of plywood, put them on a flat surface, took straight edges, measured carefully to get such that the straight edges would go down both sides, sort of like that, the length of the board. Set the router in there, made sure it was all set correctly, and then ran the router with that bit down each board. And then what that allowed me to do, that allowed me to put the pipe right in that groove, so it's fully supported the whole length of the plywood. And then I used a Forstner bit and a spade bit to put the hole in the 2x4 and then run the pipe up through there. And then the goal is, and this is not going to completely work because my plywood fell and it broke the little end off, but effectively you can kind of see how that's going to work, where the plywood just basically friction fits the pipe down through it, and then as it comes out on the end, the goal is to take bearings, and I used a circle cutter bit that I either got this at Home Depot or I got it at Rockler. I'm not sure. I got this online. But I take a circle cutter bit because I did not have any Forstner bits of the exact size of the outer diameter of this bearing. And as you can see, I use Forstner bits on the inside to make a slightly lower area such that the inner race of the bearing does not touch, because the only place that's supposed to touch is on the pipe, and then this is supposed to spin. So let's see if I can get this to work. This is a friction fit. You can hear that friction fit. And put that on there. Take this, set that down over, and then if that was not in the way, you can see that rotates. So the goal is, and you can also see that this is basically the same height as the table. So when it's attached, there's going to be another piece of 2x4 on here that's actually solidly attached to the frame that this 2x4 is also solidly attached into. And then this is going to be free floating through the frame. I'm going to have a, let's see if I have it over here somewhere. And knocking everything over. I'm going to put one of these, which is 5/16 round rod. I'm going to put that not completely through the whole thing, but through the outside of the frame and drill hole into here. So put a 5/16 inch rod on both sides. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to need it in both sides of the same end or just one in each side of the front section. But in any case, that is going to hold to make sure this does not rotate. And that was the other reason I put the 2x4 here, because it's going to be much more solid to put the rod through and hold in the 2x4 than it would have been into the plywood. It probably would have been okay in the plywood, but it'll be more secure in the 2x4. But then I'm just going to make sure, currently these are not countersunk because these were temporary hold. But once I'm done, these will all be countersunk. And then I will be able to, in this 2 foot by 4 foot, or actually it's 46.5 inches. One of the sanders can go here with the dust port facing outward. That would be this one. And then this other sander can go right next to it with the dust port facing outward in this direction. And then we rotate it around and the joiner can go on the other side. And then I'm going to be able to have a shelf down below that, but I haven't built that part yet because I was just finishing up these pieces. And the other cool thing with this, because when friction fitting, and before I'm also going to put let's see if I have it over here somewhere. Will I knock everything down? No. From side to side to keep it from spreading, I'm going to run this the length through the pipe, out through the holes in here, and then put nuts and such. So this is a 3/8 inch threaded rod. That's going to go through the whole length, and that's going to hold the top two sides together so it won't pull apart. So that should make it really nice. And then I really don't know if I can do this with one hand, but the one cool thing is, like, I got this friction fit in there. I was real happy initially, and this was before I had the hole through and before I had it really dug out with the other Forstner bit, the smaller size that you can see here. I just had a little bit carved out, and it's like, okay, now how am I going to get that back out? Luckily, I had a binder clip, and again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with one hand, but as it turns out, that goes down in there, and it pulled it up out. So, as an added bonus, I was able to get it back out to finish the project. But again, it's a friction fit there, so this will hold nice and tight into the sideboard. And then this is the inside diameter is a friction fit on the pipe threads. This was just a 4 foot threaded pipe, I think galvanized threaded pipe that I got at Home Depot. But the threads, without grinding them off, were too wide to go into the bearing. So I turned on the little round wheel. Didn't have the dust collection because I didn't want all the chips going into the dust collector, but turned on the little round wheel, and just very carefully held it and rotated it around and ground it off so it was all nice and even. But yeah, friction fits on the inside, friction fits in the 2x4, and hopefully if the weekend goes well, I'll actually have the stand such that we can actually put this together at least a little bit further. I'll also have to finish up attaching the side completely. But this is, because it's 3/4, basically, you know, 4 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. It's basically 3 inches thick. So 3-inch thick, properly screwed together plywood. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to glue it. I shouldn't need to glue it, and it'll make it a lot easier to take it apart if I ever have to change things. If I don't, just quite a few screws will be just fine to hold it. But the benefit of this basically being solid is I will be able to use the attachment points or such for the tools and basically screw them down or bolt them down. More likely bolt them down to the table, because then assuming I get them set up and aligned correctly, I can run bolts the whole way through and just use nuts and bolts that way, and then it'll hold securely, and those things aren't going to go anywhere. This is going to be plenty solid for that weight. 3 inches of plywood that's tied together, you could probably drive a car on for a little ramp or such. So yeah, for the little amount of tools that are going to be on there, this is going to be way overbuilt, but it will work just fine. And again, that's the first progress. So I wanted to do this. Is probably going to be a 2-part video, just because otherwise it's going to be really long, and I don't think anyone will watch it. For all I know, no one will watch it anyway. But in case someone does, this is what I'm working on so far, and these were the tools that I had used. I also used my drill press to use the circle cutter bit to put that in, and then just use the Forstner bit down in to clear the center out, because the circle cutter bit just cuts the outside edge in a little groove with this little cutter side, and then in order to get the centerpiece out that it left behind, I used a larger Forstner bit, and then I used a smaller Forstner bit that was just larger than this inner race of the bearing to make the inner hole. So yep, that is the progress so far, and hopefully eventually with the next video I'll have these on a stand, or at least have an actual stand that I can put them on, and then I will actually have more space, which will be really awesome. Hope that was useful. Let me know in the comments if it was.